support people with disabilities by increasing awareness of mental health self-care. We are also hoping to provide resources to help sustain and strengthen the current workforce and limit staff turnover. We've done this project in 2 series. We started with disability agency leadership back in the fall, and we focused on frontline supervisors, case managers, and also those in leadership positions to help them build capacity to support the mental health needs of direct support professionals. So now we're really excited to kick off this part, or the second part of our series, where we're going to be focusing more on developing personal resilience. So before we begin, we want to describe an ECHO session and what sets them apart from other trainings. In essence, ECHO allows us to move information and not people, which has been proven today since we have people from Canada and kind of all over the United States, which is a little bit mind-blowing to think about. We ultimately want you to become a resource for your community. Each session, there will be a formal didactic portion on a designated topic, followed by a case presentation. This is an opportunity for a participant to present a case of an employee and get feedback and resources from our content specialists as well as other participants. It's an excellent opportunity to learn about new resources and ways to assist your colleagues and employees if you are in a supervisor role, and in turn, the people that you work with every day. We encourage you to take part in the case presentation. Please feel free to use Mentimeter question and answers to submit questions that would be anonymous. Your participation is key to the success of our ECHO sessions. We aim to create an interactive community where our presenters, stakeholders, and community members all support each other during a session. We encourage you to turn on your camera as long as you are comfortable and safe doing so. We appreciate when participants are engaged in asking questions after the didactic. With our Mentimeter software, if a question comes while the presenter is presenting, feel free to go ahead and submit that, and we will showcase those once we get to that part of this session. Sorry, I jumped ahead. So if we run out of time and we can't answer your questions, we'll make every effort to answer them in the supplemental resources that will be emailed out after each session. Privacy is important to us. So if you are asking questions about maybe somebody that you work with or yourself, please do not give out any identifying information that may identify that person. All questions that are submitted using Mentimeter are anonymous. You can earn social work CEUs and certificates of completion. To receive credit, we ask that you fill out the evaluation after this session. We'll throw up a QR code and a link to that presentation at the end of the session. So just some housekeeping things. I apologize if you got multiple calendar invites from me. I'm not exactly sure what Outlook is doing. I have noticed that it's been sending 2 or 3 invites at a time. So please know that I'm trying not to be creepy. It's just Outlook doing its own thing. So please check your junk mail for communications. We do send out reminders before each session, since the sessions occur every other week. And you're going to notice in our evaluations, we have some measures in there that talk about resilience factors. And this is to help us better understand the effects of burnout, stress, and turnover in the disability field. These factors will help us illustrate the most prominent mental health challenges and help us improve outcomes in the workplace. The survey is completely anonymous and no identifying information will be collected. So please provide honest answers to the best of your ability and comfort level. So we'll go ahead and get started with the session. I would like to introduce our ECHO Hub team. Our Hub team consists of research associates from Minot State University's North Dakota Center for Persons with Disabilities. And we also have a partnership with the University of Minnesota's USED, who we have Jen Hall-Landy and Linda Anderson, who couldn't be here with us today, but we wanted to make sure that we gave them a shout out. And I am Krista Opsdahl. I am the ECHO coordinator, or project ECHO coordinator here at our center. Jessica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Jessica Reiswig. I work for the ECHO series as well, alongside Krista. I also work for ASTEP, which is a program at Minot State University that is an inclusive program to support students with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities to attend college alongside their peers. So I manage about 40 mentors on that, but I'm really happy to be a part of this program and find other ways to impact people. And I've taken a lot away from it as a supervisor as well. So I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Jessica. Jody, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jody Patchen, and I'm the administrative assistant for ECHO and also A-STEP. Happy to be here and welcome everybody back.
Thanks, Jody. You left out, you're the one who keeps me on track with everything, but that's okay. I don't think that's officially your job title. Kyle, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Absolutely. My name is Kyle Erickson. I'm a research on ECHO. I'm really new to this program, but I'm really excited to learn what this is all about and just get my hands dirty.
Thank you, Kyle. And I also want to give a shout out to Margaret Paslow. She is also on our hub team and has helped us with a lot of our lit review information. So I would like to introduce our speaker, Heidi Newsma. Heidi is the chair of behavioral health sciences at the University of Mary, which includes the undergraduate programs of addiction counseling, criminal justice, psychology, and social work. Her areas of expertise are in generalist and clinical practice and social work group, community, organization, policy, crisis intervention, trauma, and administrative leadership. Please welcome Heidi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for, I am just so impressed with what you guys are doing here with all of our direct care professionals here in the state. I believe it's the state of North Dakota. And I just have a passion for working with frontline workers in all types of professions. So thank you so much for inviting me to be your guest speaker today. I was brought to your group to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. And the topic we're going to really just hit hard on today is compassion fatigue. And so I don't have the controls, so my hands are free. So I might start talking with my hands a little bit. And Krista is going to be the mastermind behind the technology here. So I'm just going to let her know every time to go ahead and move on to the next slide if she can't tell by what I'm saying. So I look a little different. That's a young picture of me, and I think I might keep that for the next 10 years rather than allowing myself to age the way we all age. So anyway, go ahead. Let's go ahead and hop on to the next slide, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, our agenda here today was just really for me to do a brief introduction of myself, because that's really not the important piece. I do have a clinical license in social work. I have a master's in social work. And so I've spent a lot of time in direct practice, but now I'm also in administration and teach in the academic field and provide a lot of education with this style with presentations. We are going to talk about compassion fatigue, and we're going to talk about vicarious or secondary trauma, and I'm going to provide you with some burnout descriptions. We are going to talk about components that intervene with that. We are going to watch a little video. I really like to bring us back to science and what our brain is doing when we're feeling all these different things. And then we're going to talk about how compassion fatigue can affect you both professionally and personally impact you. We're going to talk about self-care. And then I'm also going to provide you some assessments that you're going to be able to do on your own time. I have a very limited amount of time with you today, so I'm going to provide you some resources that if this conversation intrigues you, if the education you're going to be receiving today, and you want to really find out what is going on, maybe with how you're feeling, what you're thinking, what is all going into play into how you're working with clients, I'm going to provide you a self-assessment that you're going to be able to do on your own. And then we're going to talk about a few techniques, and then we're going to do some question and answers if we have time for that as well. Next slide, please. When we're in this type of format, and when we're even when we're face-to-face, the hard part with a presenter is knowing what level of knowledge somebody has on a topic. So some of these things you may already know definitions, you already made terms, but I am going to briefly go through them just so that we are all on the same level with going into these next slides. So what is compassion fatigue? I think sometimes we use that word and we really don't know in depth what it means. It's kind of like a trendy thing that people talk about, but I'm here to tell you that this really is a real thing that professionals go through that are in the helping field. So what it is, it's a syndrome that has stress-related symptoms characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion experienced by caregivers with other helping professionals in reactions to working with traumatized people over an extended period of time. And so the first part is what could happen if you do actually have compassion fatigue is that it could reduce your ability to empathize or feel compassion for others. And so the first part of this is I want to make sure everybody on this Zoom today understands, what does empathizing mean? What does empathetic responses mean? And why is that important? If compassion fatigue reduces our ability to empathize, why is that important to each one of us who works in the helping profession? So sometimes we get confused with the definitions between empathy and sympathy. And so what we want to make sure is happening here is that we are empathizing with our clients rather than sympathizing with them when we're working with them on a daily basis. So empathy, just real quickly, is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And so what does that relationship look like when we talk about? So it's essential for us to have empathetic relationship with our clients in order to help them reach their goals, and then also in order for us not to develop compassion fatigue. So what does that look like for a healthy relationship? We want to make sure that when we're working with people, we want to make sure we call out their courage. We want to thank them for trusting us and providing us with the information that they share with us on a daily basis. We want to make sure we're clarifying and asking the right questions. And we can do that in a way, if they tell us something, we can say, thank you for trusting me with this information, clarifying from what I'm hearing you say. Sometimes in the helping profession, we get teased for maybe having those questions and saying it in that way, but that really is a good way to provide some empathetic responses. We want to make sure that we're doing some character boosting. And what that looks like is we can say, I know that this sounds like it's a difficult situation for you, and I think you've shown a lot of courage. And so we want to make sure that we are boosting somebody's character. And then we just want to convey that we care, but in a way that isn't going to harm us as working individuals. So we can just go back to them and say, you know yourself best. What do you think would be the most helpful for you as a way for me helping you? And then also just checking in with them on a regular basis, how they're feeling today. And so those are all examples of what I mean by having an empathetic relationship. So when we go back to saying it can reduce our ability. So if we have compassion fatigue, it can reduce our ability to really just do all of those things that I just told you that are really important to when we're working with people in our field. So if we have that and it's affecting our empathetic responses, and then if we add that it's combined with a lack of having boundaries or compassion, that compassion fatigue can really result and can be problematic for you and your clients. So empathy will require that we understand both emotionally and cognitively the experience with your client and be able to communicate that understanding. But providing that, it protects you from ending up having compassion fatigue, but it can also result in us more directly experiencing the client's distress. Providers who are not able to find that balance of sufficient empathy with their patients and clients and sufficient protective boundaries for their own emotions are more vulnerable to compassion fatigue. So that's a really important component of how to help protect yourself and your clients. Going on the slide, it talks about people who have been direct victims of trauma, but have intense involvement with people who have. So you don't necessarily have to have had traumatic experiences in your life, but you can develop compassion fatigue if you are working with people who have had traumatic experiences, and it can result in a decreased ability to cope with the everyday environment, and it has been defined as a state of emotional distress and exhaustion. And there are some vulnerability factors for compassion fatigue that result from several areas, and the first being a combination, again, of that empathy and a lack of boundaries, which is what I said earlier. So I just wanted to really hit that beginning part a little harder than I normally would. So you can go ahead and change to the next slide. Let's talk a little bit about some additional factors with compassion fatigue and what could maybe be causing some of these symptoms. I have it broken down here into 3 areas: working environment and workload. If you have a high intensity workload, I know that so many of my colleagues are just talking about they are low staffed and it's getting worse, and they are having a higher workload. Their caseloads are getting larger and larger and larger. So that could really be problematic for some of our peers. So a high intensity workload, and then you also have, maybe you have a smaller caseload, but the individuals on your caseload, their needs are getting larger and larger and larger. Physically and emotionally demanding assignments, additional work days, task repetitiveness, perceived lack of control in the workplace or work, low job satisfaction and unclear outcomes or success at work, work-life balance. This is really important, and we're going to talk about that at the end of the presentation, having to do with self-care and what that looks like. But inadequate rest time during the workday and leaving you from work. I was a victim of this almost my whole career. I think I'm now finally listening to what I'm saying and listening to how I'm teaching others about work-life balance. And I can tell you the difference has been incredible for me. I teach a night class on Tuesday nights now. I make sure and put in my schedule that I will not look at my computer and I will not answer phone calls for 4 hours sometime during that week, just to make sure I have that work-life balance. And then I choose, those are the times that I care for my mom. She's almost 90. So those are the times I work with, I spend with her in a quality way. And I just add all those things that I've been putting off. Lack of support, lack of meaningful recognition can happen, poor managerial support, and then personal self-care, poor personal resilience and coping capacities. Krista, you can go ahead. There are a couple components that I like to bring to your attention. There is vicarious or secondary traumatic stress, and it's indirect exposure to trauma via helping others. And so some of those symptoms I want to draw out for your attention is symptoms include anxiety, intrusive thoughts, hypervigilance, and numbness. And then there's also what we're going to talk about is burnout. It's associated with too much work and not enough resources to do the work well. And the effect of that could be some depression, anxiety, physical and emotional exhaustion, difficulty enjoying activities at work and home, and may experience more conflicts. And when I look at the burnout one, I think sometimes, and this is not a very professional term, but I really think sometimes we poo-poo some of those things that I just mentioned: emotional exhaustion, difficult enjoying activities, all those different things. I think we diminish, we put those down a little bit when really many of us have felt that. So you can go ahead and do the next slide. When we talk about compassion fatigue, it is not new. I have been in the helping profession for most of my life, most of my adult life. And even when I was a young girl in school, I would help the students in our school that had disabilities. And so even from a young age on, I help people. That's just part of my makeup. And so, but I had never been told about this until probably, I would say 10, 15 years ago, but still that makes it that this topic is not new to people working in the helping profession. And because of that, we have been able to look back and look at the research and just really start having evidence-based research that's helping us help all of us who are in the helping profession. And so this is some information that we've gathered with some of our research. So compassion fatigue and just some differences with burnout is it's a depletion of empathy reserve that can arise from helping others. And as I'm talking about these, I would like you to just be an interactive participant. And if you have a sheet of paper because you might use this later when you're doing additional research for yourself. Kind of mark which ones of these that you align with or that you identify with. So feeling on edge and easy to startle, feeling hopelessness as if nothing will ever go right, feeling angry or irritable without any obvious reason, avoiding certain thoughts or feelings because they remind you of some frightening experience, avoiding a certain situation or activities, avoiding or ignoring people you help, feeling disconnected from others, loss of sleep, and just feeling this whole, like this overwhelmed feeling of just feeling drained and really not being able to identify what's contributing to it. So, an example of like if your life has not changed, nothing in your life has happened, there hasn't been a death, there hasn't been a life-changing event, but yet you're still feeling drained and you can't pinpoint why, you might want to look to something like compassion fatigue. And then also, let's go to burnout a minute. So that is a stress-related condition built up over a period of time by working related factors such as that high workload and feeling underappreciated. And here's what this can look like. Feeling anxious or irritable, some of the same signs. Feeling depressed, feeling tired most days, even after resting. Loss of sleep, difficult concentrating, getting sick more often, change in appetite, disconnecting from others, reduced work productivity, and just not caring anymore, just kind of fed up. And so what I see a lot, people get these confused and with the burnout. So we have in our profession, and I think we can all look at peers, and I think we can even maybe look at ourselves over time. We've maybe all experienced what burnout feels like. But we have to remember who we're working with and with our clients, and they are vulnerable in the first place most times. And so I don't think we have, I just don't think as we've chosen this profession that we're in, and I just don't feel that we have the right to just not care about our clients anymore and just be fed up to a point where it could affect our clients, it could affect our peers, and it could affect the people in our families. And so we have to address that in a way that is helpful and healthy. And we have to be vulnerable and just acknowledge, what side of the fence we're on here. Go ahead and you can choose that. When she changes here, we are going to watch a video. I'm kind of a science nerd, not only in the helping profession, but I just like knowing what our brain is going through and what we're all made up of. So you can go ahead and hit this. It's about a little over 4 minutes.
Are you sleeping restlessly, feeling irritable or moody, forgetting little things, and feeling overwhelmed and isolated? Don't worry, we've all been there. You're probably just stressed out. Stress isn't always a bad thing. It can be handy for a burst of extra energy and focus, like when you're playing a competitive sport or have to speak in public. But when it's continuous, the kind most of us face day in and day out, it actually begins to change your brain. Chronic stress, like being overworked or having arguments at home, can affect brain size, its structure, and how it functions, right down to the level of your genes. Stress begins with something called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, a series of interactions between endocrine glands in the brain and on the kidney, which controls your body's reaction to stress. When your brain detects a stressful situation, your HPA axis is instantly activated and releases a hormone called cortisol, which primes your body for instant action. But high levels of cortisol over long periods of time wreak havoc on your brain. For example, chronic stress increases the activity level and number of neural connections in the amygdala, your brain's fear center. And as levels of cortisol rise, electric signals in your hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with learning, memories, and stress control, deteriorate. The hippocampus also inhibits the activity of the HPA axis, so when it weakens, so does your ability to control your stress. That's not all though. Cortisol can literally cause your brain to shrink in size. Too much of it results in the loss of synaptic connections between neurons and the shrinking of your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates behaviors like concentration, decision-making, judgment, and social interaction. It also leads to fewer new brain cells being made in the hippocampus. This means chronic stress might make it harder for you to learn and remember things, and also set the stage for more serious mental problems like depression and eventually Alzheimer's disease. The effects of stress may filter right down to your brain's DNA. An experiment showed that the amount of nurturing a mother rat provides its newborn baby plays a part in determining how that baby responds to stress later in life. The pups of nurturing moms turned out less sensitive to stress because their brains developed more cortisol receptors, which stick to cortisol and dampen the stress response. The pups of negligent moms had the opposite outcome, and so became more sensitive to stress throughout life. These are considered epigenetic changes, meaning that they affect which genes are expressed without directly changing the genetic code. And these changes can be reversed if the moms are swapped. But there's a surprising result. The epigenetic changes caused by one single mother rat were passed down to many generations of rats after her. In other words, the results of these actions were inheritable. It's not all bad news, though. There are many ways to reverse what cortisol does to your stressed brain. The most powerful weapons are exercise and meditation, which involves breathing deeply and being aware and focused on your surroundings. Both of these activities decrease your stress and increase the size of the hippocampus, thereby improving your memory. So don't feel defeated by the pressures of daily life. Get in control of your stress before it takes control of you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to talk just a few seconds about that video. The reason I put that video in there is because I want you to make the mind-body connection, and I want you to know that a stressful situation and compassion fatigue aren't. I mean, it's affecting our mind, it's affecting our body, and then you have behaviors. So then the way you think is the way you feel is the way you behave. And those are the anxiety, the depression, and not caring, and all those different types of things. So our bodies are wonderfully made, and the way our brain works and the way our body, when they work together, those are all warning signs for us. And those are all things, if we listen to them and we can try to make those changes, we can't always control the situations that we're in, but we can maybe control how we react to some of them. And then we can also do, like they said, with the meditation and the deep breathing. And we'll talk about a few of those things. And that's not everybody's catch-all, is to do meditation and exercise. And so I'll be addressing some of those other things as we move on here. But so who can experience compassion fatigue? So people who provide, and I think this is almost everybody in this presentation, so care, assistance, and support to others in physically or emotional pain with empathy and compassion. And then these qualities that help them to do their job place them in a direct path to experience vicarious trauma, and which is a compassion fatigue component. So the job that you love or the job that you have can put you in a direct path to be more susceptible to compassion fatigue. So, and then if this continues, this exposure could develop several of the symptoms associated with PTSD. And so we're not going to talk about PTSD today. That's a different presentation, but it could lead to that if there isn't some changes going on. Kate, you can go ahead and go over to the other one. So what are some causes here? We'll talk about that some more. Working with adults, and specifically with children who experience trauma and/or violence. And then here's another one, really some education, which I know that you guys are getting some great education here. So lack of training in dealing with trauma issues. That is a big component of when we're working in the helping profession, to have us be trained in trauma. And then too, if you have some past histories of trauma or violence in your life that you haven't worked through, or that maybe some triggers can occur. I see this very often, where either there was past trauma as a child, there was past trauma as an adult, or something traumatic happens during the time when you're working with all of these individuals in your own personal life. And so we have to be aware of how that can increase our vulnerabilities to having compassion fatigue. And then a minimum or lack of self-care habits. We're going to talk more about that. And then long periods of intense work with victims of trauma or violence. You can go ahead and switch with that. What is a professional impact? We talked briefly about that, but I'm just going to name these off and you can go back and look at them further. Low motivation, task avoidance, poor work commitments, conflict between staff members, lack of job satisfaction, obsessive thoughts for details, anger, apathy, lack of interest or enthusiasm or concern, exhaustion and detachment. And so without a show of hands, because we can't do that, but even just think of all the people that you've worked with in this field that you're in, and all of a sudden you can observe people, and hopefully it hasn't been you, who have just lack of interest, making excuses of why they're not doing their job to the best of their ability anymore, or they're starting to cut corners in the job that they have, or the things that's always coming out of their mouth is that, they're just not happy with their job. This can all be signs of compassion fatigue, not necessarily that this person is just not a good employee or they're not fit for this field. It could really be tied into compassion fatigue. You can go ahead and turn. We're going to talk about the personal impact. There are 5 domains, and it's cognitive, emotional, behavioral, social, and psychological. So compassion fatigue can hit you in any of these areas, and I'll explain them in detail on the next slide. So cognitive that's where it's connected to those intrusive memories, the confusion, the spaciness, being rigid, having some self-doubt, disorientation, self-harm thoughts. It can hit you in the emotional category, that's where your anxiety, you're feeling anxious, some depression, fear, sadness, anger, rage, depleted, overwhelmed. Behavioral, like if you're hypervigilant or you have some sleep disturbances, those startle responses that we talk about, even if your appetite is changing or moody or impatient. And then social, these are new ones that weren't addressed on the previous slide. Being really overprotective, maybe withdrawn, isolation, indifference, loneliness, like you're working with all of these people, but yet inside you're still feeling loneliness. And loneliness is one of the biggest epidemics right now that is causing a lot of health issues for people that are working on the front lines. Decrease of intimacy, lack of interest in socialization, and then the physiological symptoms, body aches, dizziness, breathing difficulties, somatic complaints, impaired immune system, rapid breathing heartbeat. Sometimes we find that with the physiological, we find that people are getting sick more often. We find that, they're starting to have body aches where maybe they're talking about, I think I might have, like fibromyalgia, I might have all these different things. And really, if you are willing to take yourself and look inward and do what I call, and this is kind of a funny term, but I do use it sometimes, it's called nasal gazing. If you are look in at yourself and really look through these different components, and not just push off some of these things that you're thinking or feeling, because really, just like we tell our clients, they are sometimes the best indicator, and they know what's going on. If you take some time and look, you maybe can trace it back to that as well. Okay, we can go ahead and go on to the next one. So I want you to know that I really hope that after this, I hope that those of you who have experienced or can maybe see this in some of your coworkers and have a conversation with them if they haven't attended this, but seek or ask for help if you're experiencing difficulties separating work responsibilities from personal life. You have an idea and vision of the world in terms of victims and perpetrators, and then you experience chronic sadness or pain. Okay, we can go on to the next one. When we talk about compassion fatigue, I'm very strength-based when I try to give presentations or when I try to educate people or when I work with clients, because I believe it's where we need to go, because if we're feeling this way, what is the goal? What is the goal of what we want? And so I talk about compassion satisfaction, because that is just as important to know about as it is compassion fatigue and all the details. So compassion satisfaction, it's the positive state of feeling happy and at ease in your role for a helping profession. So we want you to come to work and feel happy, because when you feel happy, you're better able to serve the needs of your clients. We want you to believe in yourself and your abilities. You were hired for this position. You were intended for this position. Our clients need you. And so we just want you to believe in yourself and your abilities and the training that you're receiving. We want you to find life satisfying, not only in your job, but in just your whole life. We want you to find yourself learning new things from people you care for. We want you to feel connected with others. I mean, we are made for connection in this world and in this life. And so we want to make sure that you are feeling connected to others. We want to make sure that you have a good balance between work and free time. And I hope that the institutions that you work for and the agencies and the organizations feel the same with that, because that's really important. And we want you to feel calm and pleased with your work. We want you to feel satisfied from working with those you help. Hopefully that's exactly why you got into the work that you got into. None of us get into this work hoping that we are going to feel miserable every day or that we are going to develop compassion fatigue or PTSD. These are really some of the reasons why we get into the work that we do. And we want you to have happy thoughts about those that you help and how you could help them. In my profession, I have worked with some really, really difficult clients, but I can maybe on one hand, truly and honestly say that I maybe didn't have happy thoughts about maybe 5. And those were probably some of the, not really the toughest clients I ever served, just the character of the people that I worked with were just really difficult sometimes. And so I would say maybe out of all those years, there were only 5. So we want you to have those happy thoughts. So, but like I said, it's important to recognize the symptoms of burnout, compassion fatigue, but it is just as important to acknowledge when things are going right. And we want to make sure and talk about those and celebrate those. And so we want to see from today, if you can start working on attaining this state that I call compassion satisfaction. And hopefully that will be your ultimate goal. And when you're working on your self-care and you're working within your agencies, that you could attain this, having it be a group goal of your organization for all of your peers. Okay, you can go ahead and turn that one. This is one of the things I talked about in the beginning. I really want you to take some time. And if you guys are supervisors on this call, take some time hopefully try to take some time with your employees. But go ahead and take some time and do this with yourself. There's a self-assessment here. It's a self-report tool that covers the symptoms such as loss of productivity, depression, intrusive thoughts, jumpiness, tiredness, feelings of being on edge or trapped, or inability to separate personal and professional life. The measure also assesses that compassion satisfaction that I was talking about. So the positive emotions associated with helping others, such as happiness, pride, and satisfaction. And so some things after you do that, we want you to make sure that you have a self-care routine, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here. We want you to review your belief about self-care and what that means to you. Some of the students that I work with, self-care right now to them as an 18-year-old truly is a Starbucks coffee, a massage, getting their nails done, and even into high school. And so we have really some honest discussions about your belief about self-care, because a Starbucks isn't going to sustain you through this long term. Massage isn't going to sustain you. So we have to talk about your belief. It's different from selfish acts. So we want you to make sure you're engaging in activities such as games, watching funny, easy movies, all these different things that can help bring you some satisfaction. Community compassion, validate your self-care habits and support a sense of resilience, and do not allow isolation and immersion in humor. And that's kind of my little, I think we need that in our profession to some degree. I don't think we can let it get out of control, but I do think that that can help. It's not a fix-all, but we can't forget to add it in there. So we are all vulnerable in different ways and at different times, and we need to remember that when we're working with our peers. And this whole presentation might not resonate with you today, but I hope that you keep it handy in case someday that you'll need the information. So you can go ahead and turn. This is just an example of what that the professional quality of life scale looks like. And so when you go into that, it's a wonderful tool that you can use on your own to see and to dig in a little deeper on the topic that we're talking today. Okay, you can go ahead and go on. Compassion fatigue practice every day. Throughout the next slides here, we're going to go on this a little deeper. You're going to want to find out how you can have a mind and body connection. It's different for every person. I want you to make sure that you process events with somebody within your agency. I typically refer my peers, and I typically refer people in these presentations to process that with your supervisor, more so over even peers, because your supervisor can have access to all your client information, while your peer might not be able to have access with that information because of your licensing or because of the ethics that you follow. Self-soothe. This is just not something that we teach people with disabilities to do. We have to be able to self-soothe ourselves in order to teach that from somebody else. We need to feed our spirits, muscle relaxation, mindfulness, humor. Okay, let's go on to the next one in a minute. So self-care practices will help prevent, and it can help prevent compassion fatigue. So we are just going to go through some of those a little bit more. I have to get through some of this. I think I only have about 5 more minutes. We can go through this slide, I think, and I'm going to take you to the plan for self-care. I'm going to spend my last 5 minutes on this. You can go through to the next slide, please. So my plan for self-care, if you can, I'd like you to write these down again. When we're looking at self-care, I want you to look at it in, like, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think 5 different domains is what I would like. So I want you to find something in your personal realm. What is it that can help you with self-care? Under here, it can go your hobbies, how you're spending your money, how you're saving your money, and your budget. Write those down. Socially, what does it mean for you with self-care when it comes to time with friends, family, social media, or date nights? Emotional self-care, I want you to try to find something with self-care under the emotional realm. How do you, gratitude, being grateful, journaling, mood tracking, because we want to identify those triggers. That's all under the emotional component for self-care. Environmental, this might sound silly, but it can really contribute to having your environment, making your bed. I know that's something that my mom taught me. I fell away from it for many years, but try to make your bed, keep up on your chores, and then try to find some way to have some organizational skills. When it comes to mental self-care, that's when we talk about the medication, the screen time, daily affirmations and reading. I have many of my faculty, and I have many of my clients and my kids, actually. I've taught all of them to have affirmations and put it on the mirror in their bathroom. You might think that sounds funny, but it is a way to provide yourself some health care. And then reading. And at work, watch your hours worked. Make sure you're taking breaks, and then time management. And then these are some that are more common to you all. Hydration. It's keep hydrated. It can help with your self-care. Exercise, sleep, healthy eating, skincare. Even just having a skincare routine can help with your self-care. And then stretching. And this is one that a lot of us in the helping profession really fall short in. We skip our doctor's appointments, and it's a very common thing that people who have compassion fatigue, they skip their own doctor's appointments. So stay on top of all your doctor's appointments, and all of these things together can help contribute. But don't pick all of them in those categories. Just try really hard to break it out and make sure you at least have one in each one of those categories. And then put that on your self-care plan. So I think I did take a few things out of my presentation, but I know we're on a limited crunch here, but I'm really excited for this next portion for the case study. So I think you can go ahead and take it back. Thank you so much, everybody. Does anybody have any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions coming through Mentimeter.
Okay.
Well, I was wondering in particular, if I can't do the questionnaire right now, am I able to access it and do it later?
Yes, that's why I put it in there. Yep, you can add, you don't have to have a code, you don't have to, and then once you do the survey, you can just delete it and nobody sees it. So it's a very personal thing that you can do yourself and help yourself. Yep.
Okay, and I took a phone screen snapshot so I can get the email address of it if need be.
And Jessica, are you guys providing the PowerPoint slides to them?
Yes.
So you can almost, if you pull your PowerPoint up on your own computer, you can access it through that link.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Great question. Thank you.
You bet.
I think there was another question down in the chat, but it went through really quickly. Something about talking to a supervisor.
Okay, I see one. So it says a hard question. What advice or thoughts do you have for supervisors supporting staff who have not been open to the fatigue, burnout conversations as they see? I can't see the rest of the question. I'm sorry. As they see correctly, in my opinion, that their self-care and resilience is fueled by system changes of helping professionals, i.e. low pay, high hours, that aren't coming. It's not me, it's the system, in quotes.
Yeah, you know, that is tough because almost all of the things that we talked about of like how people feel, I think we have, number one, I think we have to keep on educating all of our staff, all of our faculty, all of our coworkers on maybe taking another look. Like, so if you're having those things, and let's say all of us on this call do not get paid enough, right? So that's something we all, but even if we don't get paid enough, that doesn't mean that we don't have some of these behaviors. Like, those don't necessarily have to be connected. Okay. Many of us, I work for a nonprofit, you know, like I could go to a different institution and probably get paid more, but I like where I'm at. So when you look at all of those things, you know, a supervisor must look at, I'm sure you're doing evaluations. I'm sure you're doing all these things. And so if the employee isn't willing to look at how compassion fatigue and self-care and boundaries might be contributing to the behaviors you're seeing, then it will have to be addressed in a evaluation type thing, you know, in an evaluation type way. But I think that I think you're being a very caring supervisor if you say, you know what, let's just take a look at what might be contributing to this. You are the expert in your own life, right? Remember that empathetic, we have to use those same things with employees, with our clients. Okay, so if you're saying that, you know, speaking to them and building that empathetic relationship, you know, you are the expert in your own life. And going back to some of those questions that I pointed out, or some of those ways that we can be empathetic to build that relationship, I think when you start building that empathetic relationship and that trusting relationship, they might feel more forthcoming. There are some people who don't believe in compassion fatigue, but I think it's because of the level of education that they have on it. And then, like you said, just keeping those defenses up. If you know, as a supervisor, you would have to go back to that evaluation and look more at the behaviors. And if they don't feel that it's compassion fatigue, you know, then you'll have to address what they think it is. Great question.
I think there's a question through Mentimeter oh, okay. I see Krista's comment that she'll address them after the case presentation. So I spoke too soon.
So while you're getting that up, just real close. So every one of us on this call is an adult, and we all have to end up being responsible for how we feel and for the behaviors that we have and for our relationships with people. And when you look at this, it could be in an aha moment to say, oh my gosh, okay, so I really haven't enjoyed my clients lately. I love this job, but I just really haven't connected. This could be one of the reasons why. So really, some of this might be an aha moment for you. And I'm not going to say that there's some easy fixes, but sometimes just knowing what's going on can change the way you think about it. So thank you so much, everybody.
Sure. Thank you for that presentation, Heidi.
You're welcome.
It was wonderful, and we'll hold that question we've got pending till after the case presentation. If you could stay on and maybe help us with that, that would be great. So we're going to wrap up every session with a case presentation, and the purpose of these resilience case presenters and presentations is sharing people's stories of lived experiences. And in doing that, we're hoping to really destigmatize talking about mental health, to give examples of resilient content and action, and to create a safe environment for participants to ask questions, even hard, difficult questions. And with today's presentation, we do want to give a trigger warning that this presentation does contain emotionally triggering topics around suicide and grief. So this content might be difficult for some participants, and we really care about your comfort and well-being. So if you feel the need to log off or leave this session, that is okay. We will be recording the case presentation as we have consent to do that today. So it will be sent out for later viewing if you're more comfortable with that. And we did want to share that 988 has been a number designated to route to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So dialing 988 is now active across the United States. And if you call that number, or if you text or chat 988, you will be connected to trained counselors that are part of the existing Lifeline network. And these counselors are there to listen and understand problems and provide support and connect you with resources if necessary. So please never hesitate to dial those 3 digits if needed. Our case presentation is given by Krista Opstedal today, who will seem very familiar as she's the director of this program. So Krista started her career as a direct support professional in 2008. After graduating high school, that was the job she took. And then she moved on and went to Minot State University, where she attained her bachelor's degree. When she started her journey at MSU, she was, surprisingly to me, a business major, and she had dreams of owning a restaurant/travel agency. And in her own words, she said, because that combination of business just makes sense. And to me, it does, because I love travel and I love food. So throw in animals and it's the perfect thing. She ended up changing her major her second semester of college, and she changed her major to developmental disabilities. And that was because of her love of working as a DSP. So Krista has had many roles throughout her career after obtaining her bachelor's degree. And currently she is serving as the Project Echo Coordinator here at NDCPD. So today, Krista will share her experiences with losing her dad and her ability to build up her own resiliency during the hardest time in her life. And so I'll pass it over to my friend and coworker, Krista.
Thank you, Jessica. So I just want to preface this. I have never actually told this story in full, let alone to a bunch of strangers. So please bear with me as I try to get through this. But we really felt that it was important for our team to come forward and share our experiences, because one thing I've learned with grief and loss by suicide is you're not alone. So I just wanted to share what I've experienced and hopefully have some takeaways for everyone here in the audience. So it all starts in August of 2018. My pap, who was my grandpa, passed away. It was kind of a traumatic passing. He had diabetes and he had to have one of his legs amputated when my youngest son was a baby. I can't remember exactly how old he was at the time. And his second leg got infected about 2 or 3 years later, and it needed to be amputated as well. And he was basically given a choice to either let the infection spread and take his life, or try to have the leg removed and buy some more time. He was adamant about not doing it until kind of like the last moment. And then he decided to go through with the surgery, which bought him 2 more months of life in the nursing home. And this was like the first time that I've ever experienced a close relative loss. And I've never planned a funeral before. So I remember just being baffled by the cost of everything, like the cost of caskets, and then I also started wondering, like, why do we embalm? Like, I just didn't understand the whole process. So me being the overthinker that I am, I always like dive into the research to try to answer my questions. And my biggest rock at the time was my dad. He listened to me and helped me process everything. We both had a lot of the same feelings towards what we wanted to do with our bodies when we died, because in my logical brain, it made sense to, you know, draft up a will and plan my own funeral at the same time that I was grieving my path, because it was just a way to cope. And so like I said, I really clung to my dad during that time. 6 months later, my dad died by suicide. It was obviously the worst time of my life. I was really impacted by grief. It almost felt like Groundhog's Day for like the first year after that happened. I would get my kids ready in the morning and I would take them to school. On my way to work every day, I would think about his last days, what he was thinking, what he was doing, what he was feeling. As soon as I saw my work building, I would ask myself, why didn't you send that text? You could have changed this if you would have just sent it. And eventually, as time went on, I was able to go till noon without thinking about him. But then, of course, that's when the guilt started all over again, where I was like, oh, you're finally starting to move on. How could you, if you're now disgracing his memory because you're, you know, starting to get back into your regular routines. And so basically every pillar of grief, or the stages of grief, that is 100% true. The anger, the sadness, the depression. But the problem with it was, it wasn't like a linear thing. It was like every single day I was getting hit with these emotions over and over again. This obviously bled into work and impacted my motivation at work, which was upsetting for me because that was always where my passion lied. And that was where I got like the most fulfillment. And I'm not gonna lie, I was not a great employee during those times because I just could not stop obsessing and overthinking everything. And about a year later, I finally was like, okay, Krista, you need to do something different. Like, this isn't working what you're doing. So I was ready to take on more stuff at work and try harder, I guess. And then COVID hit. So then I was isolated more than ever. I was really surprised by some of the symptoms that I was experiencing. Of course, substance use was my biggest crutch. It was the only thing that could stop the racing mind and get the numbness to set in. And it became habitual, especially after COVID hit, because there was nothing else to do. So it was like, okay, let's down a bottle and watch Tiger King. I do miss the Tiger King days. I don't miss the drinking at home alone days. But I was also very shocked by the memory loss. Like, I was somebody who could remember everything from a meeting like months prior, and all of a sudden I couldn't remember anything. And so that really surprised me. And also, I just had this acceptance that I was going to die young. Like, I just assumed by the time I was in my mid-30s, I would be gone from this world. No reason why, just that was it. So now that we're going on 3 years, I've tried to reflect, to look back, what has helped me get through all of this. And I've been very fortunate. Every job I've ever had, I've always had a really solid support system where I was able to make really close friends who are my genuine friends outside of work. And they were just there with me during all of this. They would listen to me, process my feelings and my grief. They never tried to have blanket statements prepared to make me feel better, because in reality, there's nothing that you can say that's ever going to make somebody feel better. But just sitting with somebody in that uncomfortableness, it means the world. They would even sometimes call the banners like, Krista's not having a great day. Maybe we should like go get her a coffee and come back. And just those little things just really helped me get through that. And then I also learned a lesson along the way. I was working with a new coworker. I was trying to build rapport with them, and it wasn't as effortless as some of my other friends that I now have. And I remember trying to default to my typical self-deprecating humor. I made some joke about like the weight that I had gained or something dumb like that. And it turned into this like 15-minute lecture on like positive self-talk and body positivity. And I remember being so annoyed because I was like, man, I just wanted to talk crap about myself. Like, I didn't need this lecture. But then she said something, and it was like, the things that you say to yourself, if it's something you would never say to another person, no matter how much you don't like them, then why is it okay for you to say this to yourself? And that really resonated with me because I thought back to everything that I typically say to myself, and it was monstrous. Like, there's no way I would ever say this to another human being. Maybe the Game of Thrones showrunners, because it's been 2.5 years since the ending and I'm still pissed about it. But hypothetically, I would say that to them, but never in person. So that really taught me to kind of pause, and when I'm in that self-doubt stage, to reflect and ask myself, is this helping me or is this hurting me? If it's hurting me, you need to reframe and you need to move on. 2 years after his passing, I finally sought counseling. I was very fortunate. I had a friend who found a counselor through our EAP, through our employer at the time. So I didn't have to do the counselor shopping that you typically have to do. And she really helped me with self-reflection and being able to categorize the feelings. At the time, I was also learning about trauma-informed care at the work, or at my workplace, and learning about that. A lot of the symptoms and everything really resonated with my experience. So I was able to finally give names to these feelings and kind of sort them into boxes, so that when they come up out of nowhere, it's like, okay, this reminds me of grief. This reminds me of my experience with this. And I just like to have categories for everything. So my counselor helped me with that. And then she also helped me get a formal diagnosis. At the time, I changed quite a bit about my life, but I was still struggling. I was still really stressed out. And so she referred me to do ADHD testing, and turns out I didn't have ADHD. I had OCD and then traits of OCPD, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And now knowing that formal diagnosis, I was able to just understand myself better. I have a lot of routines and habits that I go to. Like, I constantly pick my split ends, and it serves like many purposes, and I do it instinctually. Like, I don't even realize that I'm doing it half the time. And I've been very open about this with my coworkers at my current work environment, and it's actually created kind of a welcoming workplace, because if I'm in my office and I'm picking my split ends, not even realizing that, you know, my door's wide open and people could see me being weird in my office, I've actually had my coworkers pop in and be like, hey, I see you're doing your thing. Are you doing okay? Or is it just like a stimming thing? And most of the time it's just a stimming thing. Other days it's like, okay, we got to have a trauma dump day. That's what we've coined it now. I believe it was officially coined last week when we realized what we were doing. So I share this because I think it's so helpful just to have a better understanding of each other, and how do you replicate this so that other places can do this, especially when, you know, you're working for an environment that doesn't pay well. I mean, I work for a university. People kind of assume that that's a high paying job, but in reality it isn't. So that's like something that's not going to change or make me happier. But these welcoming workplaces where I can really be myself and be vulnerable, that's what keeps me going throughout the day, if that makes sense. So, and I apologize, we are going over. Here's some strategies and resources that work really well for me that I wanted to share. I love Headspace. It's a meditation app. I do subscribe to a yearly subscription that's $70, but you can use the free one just to get like the basic courses. I think I milked those for about a year, and I'm so thankful that I did, because I think I appreciate I'm able to do it better. I also will just look up chakra meditation on YouTube. I should preface this, I'm not a spiritual person, but sometimes when I'm really spiraling thought-wise in my head, I like to have more visual meditation apps going. I use Allen Mind. It's a journaling app that's free. I use Sandbox Coloring. I was actually doing that while Heidi was presenting, because I started to get really anxious about telling my story. And then I often do breathing exercises while I'm coloring. When I was experiencing a lot of grief, I downloaded this game called Elevate. It's like a brain game that really helped me with like my memory recollection, and also improved my writing. I used to think I was a really strong writer until I played that game, and I realized how much I how much redundancy I was including in unnecessary words in my writing. I also used Skillshare, which is a platform to learn new skills. So I used that to learn more about graphic design and Photoshop. I also used it to help me decorate my house better, like learn how to style things and what colors go where as a hobby. Some other strategies that worked well for me, getting massages, especially when I'm like, I can tell that my body's like really stiff, and usually it's like high levels of cortisol in my body. I've also paired this with Reiki. Like I said, I'm not really a spiritual person, but just to have somebody there to help kind of break down those walls that you create and that stuff that you're stuffing down and trying not to deal with, that's worked well for me. I'm a big proponent for lifelong learning. Like I said, I used Elevate. I also went back to school, and that's been really great for my self-confidence, honestly. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it stresses me out and makes me cry some days, but overall, I'm very happy with that decision. And I have this book called What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah. 10 out of 10 recommend. It is all about trauma, and it also goes into the science of trauma on the brain and what helps release endorphins. And it's put so beautifully and easy to understand. And finally, one of my coworkers actually just recommended, Anderson Cooper has a grief podcast, and I listened to an episode with him and Stephen Colbert talking about their losses. And my biggest takeaway was, you know, grief is so isolating, but it makes absolutely no sense because it's something that all of us will experience at some point in our life. So why is this the way that things are? So I hope that you guys can take away some of this. And yeah, I really appreciate your time, and I apologize for going over. Do we have any questions? I do see, I use the Calm app that my husband's job gives a free subscription to. That's amazing. He doesn't enjoy the benefits, but I sure do. Calming sounds, meditation, affirmations, and breath work options. Thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate that. Our next session is actually on whole person wellness, and we would love for you guys to share your favorite apps and any resources you have, because I'm really picky when it comes to meditation apps about voices. So the more the merrier. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that.
Krista, are you able to see the other question?
Oh, yes. This question was for Heidi.
So this question is, do you have any advice for people who work in organizations that have had recent changes that staff are unhappy with, leading to staff shortages, which leaves our clients with less available support?
So as far as the actual agency and the changes that have occurred, you know, I don't know any details about that, but as for a person who might be going through that, you know, sometimes we have to look at ourselves and decide if we have to ask ourselves a really hard question. And I don't know at what level this is all at, but one of the things I've helped people come to terms with is, if this is part of what's making you sick, really taking a closer look at if you can continue doing that, or if you have to look elsewhere for work. And I'm not encouraging anybody to get new jobs. That's not what I'm saying, or work for different agencies. But you really, our first job really is to take care of ourselves first, and to really make sure that we can find ways to fill our cup. I was a crisis worker, and there wasn't going to be a day that went by where life was going to happen in a way that was great, awesome, amazing. And so I had to, when I looked inward at myself, that nasal gazing, the risk of being there still outweighed anything that was happening within me. But I think you have to look back at yourself and see, you know, are these changes going to be there forever? Are they short team? And as a team, you're just going to pull together and get through it for the best of your clients, for the best of your your peers. And then really talk about the specific aspects of what is contributing to all of those unhappy feelings and thoughts. It is everywhere. Everywhere I go, people are understaffed and overworked. And I don't know what the whole I don't know what's going to fix that right now. You know, it's bigger than what we can do. So I think if you go to a different job, you might find that same problem happen right now. So, but really just looking at yourself and seeing if it's making you sick. If these changes are making you sick and if they're going to be long-term. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Heidi. And I'm so sorry, guys, that we went over time. So we're going to go ahead and kind of wrap things up. I do have another question here. Thank you for sharing your story. Who did you see to get diagnosed? I saw Entwine LLC here in Minot, North Dakota. Dr. Lisa Keller was the one who did my diagnosing. So yeah, you can always reach out to them. I can try to find maybe some resources on how to find somebody who can make those, I'm so sorry, diagnoses. So if you guys could please take the survey. This is an evaluation of our presentations, and this really helps us with future sessions. And also we share this with our funders to prove that this is necessary training. So if you guys could please scan that QR code. We do have the evaluation link. I apologize. Let me pull it up. I'm having a brain fart right now. Thank you so much, Heidi, for your presentation. That was wonderful. Actually, I was trying to incorporate some of the things into my case presentation because I was like, oh yeah, that resonates with my experience too. So thank you so much. That was really excellent. We hope to see you guys at our next session. It is going to be on February 1st, and it's going to be on whole person wellness from our DSP team. So we're really excited for that. Please click the link and take the survey or scan the QR code. We really appreciate it. Bye, everyone.